Welcome back to Behind the Educator's Lens, the podcast where we explore the minds and methods of educators who are shaping the future of learning. I'm your host, Robin Young, an instructional coach for elementary educators here in British Columbia. Today, I'm joined by someone whose work has challenged and inspired educators around the world. If you don't know him, you're going to know him soon. His name is Dr. Zach Groshell. He is an instructional coach, an education consultant, and the host of the Progressively Incorrect and Direct Instruction podcasts. He's also the author of one of my favorite books of 2025, Just Tell Them, The Power of Explanations and Explicit Teaching, a book that's making waves in the world of evidence-based instruction. In this episode, we'll dive into cognitive science, instructional coaching, and what it really means to teach with clarity and purpose. Whether you're a classroom teacher or a coach, a curious learner, this conversation is going to be packed with insight. Welcome, Dr. Zach Groshell.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation. And feel free to ask all the questions. I've been kind of making the rounds, talking to people about cognitive science and in Canada and in the US. So we're very close to each other. I'm here in Washington State. All right, let's do
it. Let's start with my favorite. It's a fun warm up because, before educators, we were people. The game is called This or That. Zach, I'm going to give you two options, and you just say the one that resonates the most. Ready?
Sounds good. I'm ready.
Well, I think I might know the answer to this one, but for our audience, direct instruction or guided discovery?
Yeah, this or that. I'll go. Or is this meant to be quick? Am I meant to? Can I fence it, or can I?
You can dive in. If you've got a thought, you feel free.
Well, direct instruction. One of the important things that I think needs to be taught to all teachers is what that is. So if we could get into that throughout, but I'll just for the purpose of the game, definitely going for direct instruction.
Love it. Okay, Twitter threads or long form blogs?
I'm a long form blog guy who often dips his toes into the threads. So
I like it. Lesson planning or curriculum design?
I think a great curriculum in your hands is superior to lesson planning, but of course, not everyone has that option, right? So, but I'll go with curriculum design.
Education debates or classroom walkthroughs?
Ooh, oh my goodness. Oh, clarify that for me a little bit so I can just what am I choosing?
Okay, so you're choosing between a natural conversation where people are talking about maybe opposing points of view in the staff room, or you're walking through a class where you're seeing all types of things that you might want to dive into.
Oh, come on, let's get into the classrooms. Let's go look at real evidence. I'll go with that.
I love that. So many people are actually afraid of that. They'd rather talk in the staff room, and then you're like, hey, you want to come in? They're like, absolutely not. Okay, and the last question, it's a bit of a heated debate on my podcast. The last question of This or That is Star Wars or Star Trek?
Well, I think as a kid, it was definitely Star Wars, and it's kind of turned into Star Trek. I'll still go with the nostalgia of Star Wars.
Yes. 1 point for my team. Thank you so much. We can be friends. So, Zach, your book that you wrote, Just Tell Them, is such a powerful call for clarity in teaching. Can you tell me what inspired you to write it?
Well, yes, I mean, the debates around education will probably always be with us, and they get split into two main camps. And one is the idea that the teacher needs to be responsible for the kids' learning. And that means a lot of external support, a lot of direct and explicit teaching. It means modifying the instructional design based on what the teacher observes, not what the students want to do or based on their interests. The other camp, sort of the romantic side of these two, not my term, just mainly believes that you need to kind of draw out what's already inside of the child. And you can kind of see where the fallacy there already kind of emerges, which is like, what if there's nothing in there? And what are you drawing out, right? And so for me, the book was really a call for people to return to a more of a common sense approach to teaching, which is that if they don't know it, I better explain it to them. If they do know it, I can ask them questions about it. And if they really know it, I can really fade that guidance and take away the reins and let them do cool stuff, but only in that order, in the order of explicit and direct instruction, starting with the teacher as the main resource of information, slowly pulling away those supports or those scaffolds until kids are independent.
You're talking here about the importance of the teacher explaining what a student may need to know. My question there is, why do you think this aspect of instruction is so undervalued nowadays?
I think for a number of reasons. I mean, different people have different views on childhood and what it should contain, right? My kid is at summer camp and there's a reason for that. I want her to freely express herself and play and do things by herself in nature without a lot of guidance, right? But the reason I want to do that during this time is because I want to preserve her summer for certain activities like that. However, we only have just 6 or 7 hours a day of school. And during school, I don't want her to be learning math by climbing up trees and by swimming in ponds. I want her to learn math by the most efficient means possible. The time's limited, and I want her to be able to. Math is relentlessly hierarchical, is how people say it, where if you sort of miss some prerequisite skills, you're always behind, always needing to catch up. So I don't want her to flounder and fail. I want her to advance, and I want her to gain these skills. And so are they more okay with kind of a discovery approach? Is maybe they just see childhood as just being more about play and discovery and less about certain external requirements. And I think it's just very important that kids get a steady diet of those things too, so they can choose, right? You get to college and you can't really choose between the harder subjects because your school just kind of allowed those who had a natural predisposition to learning them, they allowed those kids to gain it. Everyone else didn't get it. Now your choices are limited. You're limited to fewer careers, fewer options, fewer jobs. And I just think you can open up and expand people's horizons when your instruction is efficient, clear, coherent, systematic, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I often talk about, I grew up in the swimming pool, and you would never just throw a kid into the middle of the deep end and be like, okay, go. You now know how to do freestyle. You know how to do backstroke. You know how to roll your shoulders so that you can get that shoulder flexibility. And it's interesting because we all want our kids to be able to swim really well so that they don't drown. And I think sometimes that's what happens in schools, is that we forget that that direct instruction piece is what feeds their ability to be creative and to be flexible. But if they don't have that direct instruction first, they're actually missing some of those pieces that might allow them to eventually be able to show their creativity and flexibility.
Exactly. And the metaphor you use of the swimming pool is perfect. Why doesn't it apply to education in some people's minds? Is that we can't often visibly see kids drowning, right? And in the pool, we see a safety purpose, but in school, it's like, well, they're not dying in front of me. They're just struggling a little bit. Maybe next year they'll catch up. Maybe next year they'll somehow morph and develop and they'll be ready for something. Well, no, that's not how it works either. Those skills are not innate and intrinsic to every child. They need to be taught properly in the first place. And what happens is you just keep moving up levels and you keep making things more and more hard and advanced. And without those foundational skills, they have such a shaky foundation that they end up drowning. But drowning isn't expressed as being unsafe. It's expressed as, I hate school. I want to leave. I don't like it here. It usually shows up in motivation and then it shows up in kids, just feeling really bad about themselves. I feel that the folks who want to design learning around a discovery approach, a very inefficient approach to teaching, they really care about how the kids feel. But they're doing them a disservice by, giving them books before they get taught phonics and saying, go play with math before they have certain things memorized. And then in the end, the kid ends up feeling a lot worse about themselves as a result of the instructional design that was given to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that sometimes the devil's advocate is the voice of, what about student autonomy and what about choice and what about voice? And I think I hear a lot about this with universal design for learning. And so, what advice would you give to teachers that are balancing this information where, you've got this UDL strategy where you're supposed to essentially give kids voice, autonomy, choice, but the cognitive science is showing that that's actually not the way that kids learn. So, what advice might you give us?
Yeah, well, UDL is interesting because its basic premise is very, very true. And we should really listen to its overarching premise, which is that kids, just like the metaphor that's always given is that of a wheelchair ramp. Like if we have stairs and we could easily build a wheelchair ramp, build a wheelchair ramp. That way everyone can get to the door and can be able to enter into the school, right? And the same goes with how we accommodate and we allow kids certain modifications or extra time on task and things like that. All of the things we do to accommodate kids with special learning needs, those are very, very important. The part where certain interpretations of UDL go awry and go amiss is when we start talking about the assessment is the problem. So let's lower the bar for certain kids and allow them to be assessed in the way that they choose. Well, let's take like a fluency measure. We need kids to get up to a certain, number of digits correct, or number of letters correct, or number of words read correct. And we say for you get to choose to make a poster, where the other kids, they get a time test. The time test gives us much better information. It actually can be used to create fluency interventions, where the make a poster is a useless form of a test. And yet kids like that stuff, right? I know what it's like to be a kid. Kids like to choose things that are easier for them, that are more fun. And that's often not what assessment really is for. Assessment is for information. And a lot of different things. That's just the assessment side of UDL. What about actually the instruction? Some kids want to learn with their hands and other kids want to learn by reading and writing. Well, guess what? You end up creating a divide amongst kids based on their choices, and those who choose correct get better instruction, and those who don't get unsupervised instruction that's clearly inferior for learning to read and write. So I totally reject any interpretation of UDL that assumes that we can lower expectations for kids and not get the best instruction in front of them and the best tools for assessment in front of them. I think that's ridiculous.
I'd like to say, though, that is probably one of the best explanations of where UDL sits in our practice and where it is inappropriate in our practice. And I think that clip alone is paramount for what educators need to move into September, understanding, okay, this is the boundary actually for that, and this is where our cognitive science needs to take over so that all kids are reaching their maximum potential regardless of the things that they're interested in. Right?
Absolutely.
So you are also an instructional coach, which I love. What does effective coaching look like to you?
Yeah, well, it's funny we talk about these two camps, and the same camps come up in coaching. There is the side of coaching in which the coach essentially brings a lot of information to the meeting and teaches the teacher about how to be a better teacher. And then there's the side of coaching where you're meant to draw out those responses. Again, just think about how that would or would not make sense. If you're a novice teacher who's just started the year and has never taught a lesson before, what knowledge do you have to be drawn out of you? You just have university knowledge that is not being applied in any way that's effective in the classroom. So asking them lots of questions about what they could do and all this, when we know there are clear routines and systems that they need to use, the coach should just tell them. And it really comes down to like you're having the kids enter your classroom and they're all, jostling each other, they're elbowing each other. Let's start with a controlled entry outside of the classroom where we shake one kid's hand and they walk in slowly. What about your desk arrangement? Should friends be sitting next to friends? No, let's not do that. Let's make sure everybody is in an assigned seat, right? And essentially coaching for new and even sometimes just sort of mid-career teachers needs to assume that if they knew the knowledge, they'd be applying it. And if they don't, they just need more guidance and more information. Now, just like with kids, there are veteran teachers who are not just old, but have a huge toolkit that may even be better than the coach ever was able to achieve. Those folks still require coaching because it's their right, but to be developed. But you can be a lot more inquisitive. You can ask questions that are like, what are the things you've done in the past? You can say, can I just come in and sit and then bring other teachers into your classroom so they can learn from you? And essentially, they're doing inquiry-based learning where the very beginning teachers are not. They're receiving explicit instruction. That kind of coaching approach, Josh Goodrich calls it responsive coaching based on the level of knowledge of the teacher. That's how I view good coaching.
Yeah, I think that is a beautiful way to go at it because I'm new to coaching, and I do find that sometimes entering another teacher's room is a sensitive and hard place to walk into because you're not sure what's happened prior or what's going on there or where the kids are at or where the teacher is at. And asking questions can, I think, help to remove some of the defensiveness that might come. I mean, it is a very personal space, and I wonder sometimes if that's why even adults do things in an inquiry-based way, is to kind of remove some of that. Well, then you're not looking at me and what I'm doing.
Love it. Here for the people listening who want to be great coaches, I have a question, or maybe it's more of a prompt that I use every time, and it comes from responsive coaching, and that is tell me about the moment when. So what I do is I come into the classroom, I observe the lesson, I write down, and clearly, instead of calling on the same two kids, I should have used different techniques. So what I do is instead of going, hey, by the way, I like this, I like this. Now listen, you should have called on more kids than just the two that you called.
Yeah.
Instead, I say, tell me about the moment when you transitioned from the do now to the main lesson and you had to collect information from the kids on that part of the lesson. Some of the teachers will immediately acknowledge what is going on the basis of that prompt. They will go, yeah, you know what? I know what you're about to say. You're about to say I didn't call on everyone. And I'm going to go, that is what I was about to say, right? And I'm in, and now we're talking about it. There's nothing wrong about this. But tell me about the moment when you did that, or tell me about your do now, or tell me about how you finished the lesson off. And then they go, I could use some pointers, or I just really don't know. Or maybe they just say that like they thought it was awesome, right? Oh, it was great. I wouldn't have done anything differently. That's where the coach can take that as a hinge question and pivot towards, well, I noticed this. How can we do this? And that uses the evidence in that conversation as a hinge question to pivot towards, do I ask more questions of you, or do I become a little bit more forthcoming with information in the meeting?
Wow, those are really two simple questions that if you kept that in mind in your structure, I think it also helps to further that conversation without any feelings of defensiveness or worry or anxiety or anything like that. If anything, it almost is just like, you see me.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of ways coaches make the mistake of taking up too much airtime. I mean, I might be doing it right now in this call, who knows? But like you do when you praise them on something, you do want to open it up for them to be able to reflect on that.
Yeah.
You do want to take opportunities for teachers to talk about why this is the case and why this is a school we're moving towards it. However, coaching can just be an extended interview or reflection session. It can even go into the area of just like therapy, like, and now we're talking about your life and your goals and things that are completely unrelated to instruction. So that the coach does have to manage that conversation towards an end, which is the teachers are going to adopt something new in their practice for which the coach will follow up and see if it's in place and how else they can support getting that moving. It does have to be about instruction, and the coach is a source of information. Don't withhold that information if you can bring if you can bring success to that teacher.
I love that. So telling them what they need to know, but using questions to help them get there so that they can be self-reflective. Yeah.
Awesome.
One question that I do have then, is I know that you mentioned that, of course, all teachers are struggling with all types of different things, but is there a commonality that you're seeing in a lot of classrooms right now that we can share so that maybe as teachers step into their classrooms in the fall, they can see in a self-reflective manner if that applies in their classroom too?
I love that you asked that question because we get so stuck in tips and tricks and all this type of stuff in education when really the simplest things don't occur in many classrooms.
Yeah.
And that is number one, the kids just aren't listening. I mean,
Mm.
nothing sexy about that whatsoever. It's
Yeah.
that when the teacher is talking, the kids aren't listening. In another, let's say the kids are listening, but often enough the teacher just isn't recruiting them to respond and to think, right? And so you get an example of a classroom in which the teacher's basically having individual conversations with the three smartest kids in the class, the kids who are confident, the kids that like to give their answers. The opportunities to respond in an accountable way is very low, right? What about everyone? Why aren't we using universal response techniques, mini whiteboards, core response, turn and talks? These are tips and tricks, but the purpose is the kids aren't actually participating. And I guess like the other one is I just see that the teacher themselves is not listening to the kids. They're
Wow.
teaching and the kids are giving responses and the teacher's moving on without adjusting in real time based on the data that they're collecting. What does that take? That takes a teacher who is observant,
Mhm.
who's collecting lots of responses, but also has a backup plan for when the answer they got was not correct, right?
That is something that I find really interesting in observing. Okay, so obviously, if a kid gives you a right answer, you're like, okay, that was the right answer. However, it is so interesting when a kid gives a wrong answer, what the teacher does with that. What would you do if a kid gave you a wrong answer? And you're leading the class, because I think that's where I see also, I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. You do this, you do this. That's where I start to see our responses can really dictate what then happens with the lesson, right? Was it an actual lesson or did we just go right over the hill?
Right. And teachers they hear that error and they need to be ready to correct it, right? Let's not embed a misconception any further by just pretending that it wasn't correct. But what do they need to do? They need to get kind of everybody to articulate what the correct answer is. We don't want them to learn from the wrong answer from another child. We need to sort of back up just a little bit and just kind of redo that little bit of this part or segment of the lesson. And then we need to return to it because we know spaced repetition is so important. So, I mean, I always use a simple example for this, but it works for all more complex content. I say, so class, what is 5 plus 1? Everybody says 6. And I say, Johnny, what is 5 plus 2? And he says 4,
Mhm.
right? And you go, Johnny, listen, right? What was the number I said? Was it 5 plus 2? Yeah.
Mhm.
5 plus 2 is 7. Say it with me. 5 plus 2 is 7. Everybody, 5 plus 2 is 7. That's right. You know what? Let's back up a little bit. Let's do a couple different facts. 5 plus 1, 5 plus 3, 5 plus 4. Now, remember the one we all forgot? 5 plus 2, everybody, is 7. Hey, I'm going to test you guys on this later because we messed up once on 5 plus 2, and we all know that it's 7. So I'll test you on it later. That error correction procedure, it's in the book, but it comes from direct instruction, and it's simply like, I need to remodel it. We need to do some we do's. We need to do some guided practice. And I need to delay your test until another time. And I'm going to check in to see if you got it. If teachers could adjust just using that, you'd see that you're teaching a mastery. You're adjusting and you're correcting and you're making sure the kids learn the stuff.
I love that strat. I used to use that. They would always give me high energy classes because I'm a high energy teacher. And I would always tell them, okay, take out the door. Who can tell us like what that 5 plus 2 was? And okay, we've all got it. Okay, you're gone, you're gone, you're gone. And maybe 22 kids have repeated 5 plus 2. And maybe they all didn't need to repeat it that many times, but I know that there was a student in the class who needed to hear it 100 times. And so I'm getting those reps in just like push-ups as fast as I can.
And I always say in these, why do we correct? Why do we go back and start again and redo it? Why do we get everyone to, if we just have a few kids, but we need everyone to do it together. Why? It's because it's pay now or it's pay later. If you don't get them corrected and firmed up in that technique and that skill and that knowledge, then you have no chance of seeing it tomorrow. And so pay now or pay later. Give a little bit more time to this, get everybody firmed up, and then tomorrow you will be in a better position than if you just it's in our DNA, it seems like, or human nature, to just go, I don't want to hear that they're wrong. I don't want to go back and stop the flow of this. It feels like things are clicking around and now we got to go back. No, you got to, because you're just going to suffer down the road right if you don't. So
yeah, I agree. And do you find that there's certain subject areas where we're needing to do this more than others, where we're needing to slow down and figure out where we need to go back and try again?
I mean, it's all of them, but remember that, I mean, I mentioned math facts, and the same goes with phonics sounds and blends and things like that. But those are foundational kind of skills. But a lot of times when we get to more complex skills, the teacher's actually not even really articulating what the procedure is the kids should be using, or they're not articulating the concept map or the relationships between concepts. And so there are no really right answers. And so you're sort of going around the classroom going, what do you think? What do you think? And you get a kid that's totally off and you go, well, I didn't teach you well enough anyway. That, I guess that's equal to another one. So I do, when we get to more kind of discussion based and debatable things, is I would encourage teachers narrow down the content to what are the what is the acceptable range of responses. And once kids are outside of that, you need to do the same procedure. We need to go back, we need to firm it up. This is why that isn't right. This is why this is a better answer. Can everyone re-articulate it? Great, I'll test you down the road a little bit on that.
Yeah, I'd really want to take a look at your curriculum down there in the States. I don't know if you've seen the British Columbia curriculum, but it has become quite open. So I think one of the struggles is sometimes that the teachers themselves, after reading the curriculum, cannot understand what it is that they are supposed to pull out as a relationship. So is there any guidance you could give around that?
Yeah, most curriculum and quotation documents, and we're probably talking about more like lists of standards, like guiding statements with some suitable areas for the kids, for you to go with. This is how it is here too. And in a lot of places, it's just they're not specific enough. And so the teacher themselves has to kind of create the knowledge organizers that are actually the facts that need to be taught, actually the specific things that will be taught alongside one of these documents. Doing that work in PLCs, and team groups and things can help clarify those kind of documents. They're made vague, it seems like, on purpose. It's like, doesn't want to make waves. We have too many districts doing their own thing already, so everyone can adopt this. It's not helpful to teachers, so you kind of have to make it helpful for yourself and kind of design things, those extra documents that actually say what those things are going to be that you're going to teach.
I hear you mentioned professional learning communities, which I love working with other colleagues to try to attack things. Have you ever gone and coached in a PLC before and helped to kind of steer a PLC in a direction?
Yeah, yes. Unfortunately, like, the culture of teaching it's very different in different schools, and some schools just don't see the role of leaders in PLCs. And it should only be led by the teachers. And I don't find that to be right at all. I mean, the school is rowing the boat together. We all have a certain strategy that we're all working on. But yeah, in the schools that allow more coach-led PLCs, that really does mean kind of group coaching. These are some of the things I'm seeing in the school. These are some of the things you're all working on with me. And let's kind of pick something that's in common with all of us. The benefit is I'm not working one-on-one with any of them. I'm getting the benefit of efficiency. I've got now 8-10 people I can coach all at once. And I come prepared for those meetings that are like, this is a mini PD session based on the things that we're all working on. Of course, PLCs go down so many bad paths. They become complaining sessions. They become about how does the new key card system, the new security system, the new things that are logistical and, whatever. They have to be about learning, assessment, and instruction, these PLCs.
Yeah, I think also the time that teachers are given in these PLCs is a crucial element that might need to be adjusted by administration. But yeah, you've got to come prepared. I remember my last PLC at the school I was at participating in. I think we had 25 minutes. And it felt very crunched to even talk about one thing. I mean, maybe you could bring an article and you could talk about this one if you had already gone in there and taken your notes. But I think that PLCs could be an untapped potential for us as educators to start doing more of what we're doing right now and talking through some of these important things that cannot be answered in, 20 minutes.
You bring up a point about time. I mean, coaching suffers from it too. You see schools that don't give the time towards coaching, and what does the coach do? Then I guess they just sit in their office because no one can meet with them. With PLCs, like, we already mentioned that, but you have 2 PD days a year, one at the beginning of the year and one after Christmas, and that's the entire allotment of PD for teachers. We have to, if we value developing teachers, we need to give them the time. Otherwise, be honest with teachers when they sign up. At this school, no one would ever say this, but at this school, we don't develop you. You have to be as good as you already are, and you need to develop yourself. The school down the road, however, does give the time, not here, right?
Wouldn't that be nice if that was one of the interview questions that the teacher could ask the admin? So I have a question for you.
No joke though. I was at a school. It was a private school during COVID, but they were like, we're in the middle of a crisis, and you just need to already know all this stuff. Of course, everybody said yes. Yeah, of course I know it, right? But
yeah, you can come on over. We got you. We've got lots of room for you over here. So I think we have time for it. I'm looking at the clock here, and I think we have time for our session of myth busting. The very first question that I have is definitely a heated topic among educators is worksheets. And are worksheets a buzzkill?
Yeah, worksheets are only as good as what is on them. You know what I mean? And the alignment between what is on them and what was taught, right? A lot of worksheets come from like worksheet packet books that you can buy for really cheap, and you scan them, and they're terrible. I mean, I had a teacher recently who proudly, bless her heart, but proudly showed me a worksheet the kids were using, and I was like, did you teach the words that were on this worksheet? No, like it was just a bunch of riddles. So the worksheet was basically activity-based learning rather than instructional, right? However, when you teach, and you have to align the tools that you use with the instruction that you give. This is just another format for kids to produce answers. And some of the worksheets that are done are really just scaffolds, because if I had you do it verbally, or I had you do it on your mini whiteboard, you don't have the stem sentences, the cue phrases, the parts of the sentence that is doing the work for you, so that you can just focus on getting the correct answers in smaller chunks. So some worksheets are really enabling for learning because they scaffold the learning better than any other tool that you could think of. So I'm pro worksheet to the extent that it teaches the material the most efficient way possible.
So would you be in favor then of like those cute worksheets that have like, they're decorated and they have all of the borders and the special graphics and things that are perhaps unrelated but might be cute?
Yeah, don't we? No, I would not be. But don't we love like a good decorative type of
We
thing?
sure do.
Spending a lot of time on Canva or whatever else to do to make it look nice. PowerPoint suffers from the same thing. Really, I think a very minimal type of design is the overarching principle here, that just give them the information that they need to use, strip out all that fluff, allow them to focus their limited working memory and attention on just a few things. That's the UDL I talk about, which is that the design of the materials permits all learners to access the the content rather than just the kids who they have such strong raw processing power that they can ignore all these extraneous features, whittle it down to just what do I need to do and think about.
Is there a color that you would eradicate from all slides if you could?
I mean, the classic one is yellow, right? You can't even you can't read it, right? You want it to be readable. I don't really believe, I know a lot of practitioners hate red because it looks scary, but I don't know if that necessarily is the truth. If they associate your red pen with a lot of criticism that is not actionable, then I imagine they'll make an association. But they would do the same with green and the same with purple. Every time I see that purple pen, I know he's going to scribble some angry, vague criticism onto my paper. But I don't really believe that myth either, that somehow red means bad. It's the association you create with your feedback that's important.
I suppose that is one tip that elementary teachers could use, is find a color that the previous teacher didn't use. And then you're not, there's no trauma. Because we have touched at least on this distinct color. It is teal. No one has used it. You don't have any feelings about it. We are good to go, everyone. So here's another myth buster. One more for you. And this is interesting because when I was in some school-based team meetings, I started talking a lot about the science of reading because our cabinets were filled with guided reading books. And so I wanted to start the conversation around bringing in some more appropriate materials and some more appropriate teaching materials. And the response that I got was that the science of learning, or cognitive science, is too theoretical for real classrooms, and that I wouldn't be able to make it work. What might you say to somebody who would say that to you?
Well, here's the thing, is that there might be a grain of truth in that. Neuroscience, which a lot of education leaders and educators don't make this distinction, but neuroscience, which is brain science, the scanning of the brain and looking at the parts of the brain and how they light up with different stimuli that's given to the student. In general, it's not very useful to memorize the parts of the brain in order to learn. And the analogy I would give is, if I'm going to teach a kid to kick a soccer ball, do I need to teach him about the muscles inside of his leg and all these other things? I don't need to even refer to them. I just need to model how to kick it and then have the kid do it a bunch of times. And the same goes with neuroscience, as the amygdala and the myelination and all this neurospeak. It's not very useful for teachers because it's the parts of the organ that don't have any implications for teaching. However, cognitive science is just a simple model of how the mind works. That model, in my book, I use the bottleneck in terms of the working memory, and we have this infinite store for the long-term memory. Maybe you could say like a big web of different ideas that are all connected together in the form of schema. Those models, how we look at those, do help us explain and predict what will work. And so when I say things like, the reason why I'm working the problem first rather than having them work it out themselves is that they do not have enough knowledge and long-term memory in order to construct their own answer. They need it to be put into working memory, but working memory is like a bottleneck. It's very limited. So we need to do it step by step, very incrementally. And that way they can work with it in working memory, and that will be stored in long-term memory. The extent that teachers need to know of cognitive science is not much more than that. We're talking about simple models, usable models. So I completely reject the idea that that kind of information is useless. It's not that much in the first place. And it helps you explain and predict the world around you. It gives you something to think with as a teacher when you're designing your instruction.
The visual of the bottleneck really helps you to understand how learning goes. And you just mentioned one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Nathaniel Swain's book as well, about how once learning has reached long-term, we know that we have infinite amount of long-term. What a hope that is for us as teachers, that if we do right by the kids with their short-term memory and help them to transfer it to their long-term, then it's infinite amounts that we can keep going and keep teaching. But if we don't approach it in the right way, then we have to use more time and more effort and more intervention later down the road when we haven't used those proper steps to get the knowledge transfer in the first place.
Absolutely. And what people get wrong about cognition is often around long term memory. They think of long term memory as this, like, that's why I don't like the file cabinet analogy, because it's like a bunch of dusty files that just include a bunch of inert knowledge. And you're learning it for what? You're learning it because someone told you to, maybe to be really good at like trivia when you get to get to a trivia game when you're older. But no, what happens is your long term memory is what powers your thinking from then on out. There's both directions, putting it in your working memory, having you work with it, storing it in the long-term memory, but also you get to use your long-term memory to think. You can't, we get this saying in education, I don't teach kids content, I teach them how to think. Teaching them how to think involves teaching them things to think with. And those things are in your long-term memory. And that's what we often get that wrong, you know?
Yeah, I think that's when we have to go back to that spider web analogy that you talked about, how all those pieces are interconnected, and that's our web of knowledge, and that is our schema.
There you go.
Beautiful. So what's next for you? Any more books on the way? Any projects coming up? What does this year look like for you?
Yeah, I'm really getting into curriculum, especially around math. And so some secret projects coming out that are going to help kids in the earliest grades and ages be able to get better math design in front of them. And that includes perhaps some home connections as well. There's a lot of parents who are just like how it was with Sold a Story and reading. They are very upset with how math education is happening. So, in giving them the tools in a cheap way that will allow them to bypass some of the nonsense in some of the schools, that's kind of a big, that's very vague, but that's next up for me. I also am really interested in getting every school to adopt great coaching practices. And so the company that I work for is called Step Lab, and that is a technology that enables coaches to streamline their coaching and use the science of learning in tandem so that they have quick, efficient, and responsive coaching in their school that isn't just in the head of the coach. It's actually centralized in a platform. And then I suppose in addition to that, this whole year I am booked up. This has been the most crazy year for me in that people really want to hear about this book and they really want to hear about these lessons. And so I'll just be in different countries and states all for the rest of this school year.
So the best way that listeners can connect with you is by listening?
Listen to Progressively Incorrect. Listen to the Direct Instruction podcast. Just Google my name. And at this point, I have a lot of great free stuff on YouTube and so on. So yeah, come to my website as well, educationrickshaw.com. And that's like that kind of houses all of the stuff I'm doing.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know that you are super, super busy, and I was looking forward to connecting with you for a very, very long time. So thank you for taking your time with me today. And I know that there are going to be so many people who are impacted by the knowledge that you shared with us today. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. It was a blast. I hope to have you on my show. I hope we can stay in contact. It is really great to be able to talk to your listeners.
Yeah, well, anytime. I'm not as booked up as you. So anytime you need a guest, I'm here.
Awesome.
All right. Well, this is where we will part. And for my listeners, keep tuning in. And I hope that you had a wonderful time today learning with Dr. Zach Groshell.